So we'll start with Mayor Gillum. During your campaign, and this maybe is obvious, but for governor, will you accept campaign donations from the NRA?
No. I would have used another word, but my mother would not be pleased. So we'll just say no. In fact, some of you all may recall that I was sued by the NRA and the gun lobby as a city commissioner because in my city we refused to repeal an ordinance which simply said you cannot shoot guns in city parks. It's radical. Right? It's a radical notion that you would restrict people from shooting guns in a park where kids play and families picnic. But in Florida, that is so radical a notion, we enable the opportunity for elected officials to be personally sued, personally fined $5,000, personally responsible for reimbursing the attorney's fees of the opposing party up to $100,000, and subject to removal from office at the discretion of the governor. That is the law today in the state of Florida, and when I become governor, we will repeal that law, and we will make sure that we create a gun-sense state where we have reasonable background checks, where we outlaw high-capacity magazines and weapons of war which don't belong on city streets, and we put the comment back in what is, I think, very basic in this state, and that is that when we send our kids off to school, that they should at least have the reasonable expectation of being able to return home without having their lives and their future snuffed out by a weapon that is able to fire off 60 rounds of bullet power in less than 60 seconds. That's not who we are. We're better than that, and we can do better than that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. King, there has been extensive attempted mediation between Georgia and Florida over the water flow in the Apalachicola River that flows from Georgia into Florida down the Gulf of Mexico. Georgia has restricted this flow, and it has had serious consequences with our fishing industry, threatening to put our oyster fishermen out of business. As governor, what would you do to resolve this issue?
Sure, this is a difficult issue in Florida, and for those unfamiliar with it, in North Florida, for the balance of the last 2 decades, our northern neighbors, Georgia and Alabama, have been starving us of water resources that get to Apalachicola Bay and that are so significant for the fishing and the oyster industry in that area. And just recently, we saw another example. One theme you'll hear from us is that Tallahassee is not working, and that our governor has not made progress on the big issues of the day. And so in the court system right now, we're once again stymied with no relief, no resolution, no solution, and the courts have even said that the state of Florida has gone about it all wrong, and it's now being adjudicated at the Supreme Court level. But that's really the big theme of our campaign, is that over the last 2 decades, Tallahassee is not working. One party controls everything, and they've taken us to the back of the pack in nearly every economic and quality of life measurement, and the environment has paid a huge price. You know, most folks don't fully appreciate this if you listen to Rick Scott or the Republicans in office, but Florida is last of the 10 most populated states when it comes to wages, incomes, or per capita GDP. 1 out of every 2 jobs in this state pays less than $15 an hour. Now, I would think that you would have a problem with that. We have a problem with that. And we believe that a Democratic governor with an economic vision that cares for Florida's environment and cares for its people can do both well and do good. We would submit the Republicans have done neither, and we want a chance to fix it.
Mayor Levine, 10 Republican United States representatives from Florida sent a letter to the president opposing fracking and offshore drilling in Florida. Representative Dan Webster, who currently represents our district, was not one of those 10. In fact, he has supported legislation in support of offshore fracking and drilling in Florida. As governor, would you oppose offshore drilling and fracking in Florida?
Thank you. The answer is absolutely yes, but let me explain why. You know, as the former mayor of Miami Beach, we were affected by an issue called sea level rise brought about by climate change, as you know, a warming of the planet. So being the mayor of Miami Beach, I lived firsthand at sea level that was coming into our streets. Matter of fact, we invested $500 million to raise our roads, put in pumps, raise our seawalls, all because of what the fossil fuel industry is doing to our city. The state of Florida right now, 80% of our coasts are subject to sea level rise brought about by fossil fuel burning. So not only would we outlaw that, when the president came up with his crazy idea to have offshore drilling, we immediately opposed it. We immediately went on television with our commercials saying this is ridiculous. And by the way, as we know, you can't trust what the president says. And of course, Governor Scott, who by the way was all about drilling, then he decided to run for Senate and he became a born-again environmentalist, as we saw. Okay? So the bottom line, we're going to need a governor who's against it. I was honored to receive the highest medal from the President of France, which is the Officer of the Legion of Honor, for my work on climate change. In Miami Beach, we led the effort with the Sierra Club Ready for 100 to make sure we would be based on 100% renewable fuel. If I'm honored to be governor, the state of Florida will voluntarily agree and comply with the Paris Climate Change Accords.
What is your position on increasing reliance on solar energy? Opponents, power companies, argue that installation costs are high and solar energy only benefits the rich. The proponents argue that there are rebates to defray the costs of installation and the long-term energy savings justify the installation expense.
Well, let me tell you, I was proud that the same week that Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, and my city, I broke ground on a 120-acre solar farm, tripling the amount of solar energy that we produce in our city. Listen, y'all, we're the Sunshine State, right? Yeah. Why don't we make living in the Sunshine State actually mean something? We ought to be innovating. We ought to be the solar capital of the United States. And the state of Florida, we ought to be innovating in such a way that we teach the rest of the world how to survive and thrive in the face of climate change and sea level rise. Now we have a governor, Rick Scott, who says he's not a scientist. Not that y'all needed to be reminded of that. We knew that. But he takes being not a scientist to not lean into the challenges of sea level rise and global climate change. If we're trying to create the kind of economy that works for everybody, I believe that leaning into the green economy, by becoming the innovators of the United States and indeed the world, that we have an opportunity to create jobs here in the state of Florida. And not just itty-bitty jobs, I mean jobs that create the opportunity for people to earn a wage where they can take care of themselves and their families. And right now, roughly half the people in this state say that they cannot make ends meet at the end of the month, right? And so what would it mean to have a governor who took this issue, this threat, the fact that we live on a peninsula surrounded by water by all three sides of four, and that we want to make sure that we are a resilient state, and part of being a resilient state means rebuilding a resilient economy, and I believe that the nexus there is by leading into climate change, sea level rise, solar energy, and the energy of the future to create the kind of economy that we and our next generation ultimately deserves. I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Mr. King, as a Democratic governor, how will you work with the legislature that will possibly be again controlled by the Republicans? You spoke a little bit about that already.
Sure. So when you elect the next Democratic governor, you know, it will be the last time we won this election. I was a freshman in high school, which means it was a long time ago. We've lost 5 straight times. And it's likely that we will face two houses against us. We very much hope that the Senate turns in this blue wave. But we have to assume, as we're thinking about the big ideas that move Florida, is that we may have two houses against us. And the way I think about the ideas that I have presented around affordable housing, or free community college or trade school, or environmental progress, you know, I think about them like the level of dives at the Olympics. You know, if you watch the Olympics and the level of difficulty in the dives are all different. Each of these ideas is different and harder if we have 2 houses against us, but some are eminently doable quickly. So take affordable housing. I have argued from the beginning of this campaign that this is a crisis. It's one of our biggest economic issues in the state of Florida. It's a passion of my heart. I've built a company that has provided affordable housing, paying living wages and full health care. But we've got one very simple idea that would allow the next Democratic governor to invest nearly $1 billion in affordable housing. and that's simply stopping the raids in Tallahassee on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Because of the line item veto power, we have the ability to do it. I would do that. There are things like Medicaid expansion. Do we have any folks out here who are in favor of Medicaid expansion? Huge idea, battleship idea when it comes to caring for the needs of those who don't have access to health care. I believe the next governor of Florida has to lead the fight to put it on the ballot in 2020 and make it where we pass Medicaid expansion in Florida and have the ability to cover another 1 million folks in this state. That is what I'm committed to do.
Thank you. By the way, candidates, we're going to do our part here in the villages in Sumter County to change that balance by electing Warren Miller to the state representative. Okay, Mayor B. As you know, when the lottery system was originally approved by the Florida voters, it was the understanding that 50% of the proceeds would go to the funding of education. This has not happened, as the Florida legislature has consistently diverted funds from this account to other areas of the budget. Would you fight to ensure that these funds are guaranteed for education?
So the answer is absolutely yes, but let's talk about what's going on, and I think we all probably agree. Unfortunately, we've developed this cottage industry out of Tallahassee called the charter school business, okay? So what you have going on is you have a bunch of folks out there that work 60 days a year, and the rest of the time they're a lawyer for a charter school, they're a consultant for a charter school, the sister's a consultant, the wife's a consultant. We're taking money from our public school and we're putting them into someone else's business. If I'm honored to be governor, that's going to stop 100%, okay? We are going to put the money back in our public schools. Folks, let's talk about a 21st century economy. As I said, I come from a little town called Boston and a state called Massachusetts. Matter of fact, all the greatest companies in the world are either starting there in high tech or biotech. It's called the Massachusetts Miracle. Now, by the way, taxes are definitely too high, and the wages are high, and the weather's horrible. But you know why they're coming? Because they have the best education around. And in Florida, unless we invest in our education, we're not going to become a 21st century economy. So I learned early on as an entrepreneur, but one thing you don't do is you don't invest in someone else's business. So we're going to start paying teachers their competitive national salary, and that's at least $10,000 more per year. Okay? And we're going to be investing in our public schools. It's the same with the post office. We don't want to invest in FedEx or DHL or UPS. We own the post office. We own the public schools. If I'm governor, we're going to become the greatest public school system in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Gillum, another education question. Florida is ranked 47th of 50 states in education. The salaries of teachers are abysmally low. What's your plan to attract teachers to Florida and to obtain budget allocations to support those efforts?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And building off the last question, first of all, I owe, next to my mother and father and a praying grandmother, my ability to be here as a contender for governor to a strong public education system. Teachers who did what I consider to be the most difficult job on earth. They poured into me, they motivated me, they inspired me, they told me I could when I thought I had reached my limits. And it is a shame that public school teachers in this state are among the bottom 10% of starting salaries for teachers. We have a teaching shortage in the state of Florida. And it's one of the reasons why I have proposed a starting salaries for teachers at $50,000 in this state and a plan to pay for it, right? Because we ought to pay teachers what they're worth to do what is among the most difficult work that exists on earth. But we can't stop there. We also have to make sure that we eradicate the system that is propped up under Republican leadership, which is high-stakes testing, which doesn't tell us what our kids know, but how well they take a test, right? We got to put that from that system. We also got to make sure we start earlier, right? I've made as a principal hallmark of my administration as mayor of Tallahassee early childhood education. Over the course of human life, over 90% of brain development that takes place between the ages of 0 and 5. 85% of that between 0 and 3. We have to make sure that all of our kids are beginning ready to learn. In this state, 40% of kindergartners are showing up at kindergarten not ready to learn. 30 million word gap at 3rd grade between upper income kids and low income kids. But there's something we can do about this. And finally, when our kids get to high school, while college worked for me, for my older brothers, it was access to skills. woodwork, shop, mechanical, electrical, technical, all of those degree programs that got you a skill that you can monetize, go to work, get a job, and earn a good wage. We got to bring that back into the public system in this state.
Mr. King, given the current efforts to deregulate EPA efforts, what will you do to keep our water safe to drink and our air safe to breathe?
So this is a huge issue in the state of Florida, and one of the things I've been proudest of our campaign about is from the very earliest day, from my very first speech, I talked about the fact that if you care about climate change in Florida, if you care about Everglades restoration, if you care about clean water, you have to have the political courage to recognize the fact that one industry has had a vice grip on environmental policy and clean water rules for the last 25 years. What industry is that? Sugar. I was the first candidate in a generation to stand up and say, I'm not going to take a dime of money from the sugar industry, and I'm not going to be beholden when it comes to environmental policy. And look, this is what we need. We're not going to be able to make progress on clean water rules, on changing our water management districts, on restoring the Everglades, until we recognize, until we have the courage to see the obstacle in our way. Just this week, the sugar industry. I stood up and I've been fighting against the sugar subsidies that prop up this industry. And there are people all over the country, Republicans and Democrats, who have said, these don't work, this doesn't make sense, this isn't right. And yet here in Florida, our Democrats and Republicans have too often sided with this industry at the expense of 22 million people who depend on clean water in this state. I'm a candidate that's going to fight against that industry. Thank you.
Mayor Levine, and you addressed this to some extent prior to this, but the governor rejected Medicaid expansion, and an estimated 80,000 Floridians were left without medical coverage. What's your position on the expansion of Medicaid benefits to needy?
I believe that health care should not be a privilege of the few, but should be a right of all Floridians going forward. That's my position. With that said, we need to not only accept Medicaid expansion money, we need to ask and demand for more. If I'm honored to be governor, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure everybody, every Floridian is covered by health insurance. If you can afford it, it needs to be affordable. If you can't afford it, we need to make sure that you can have it. What we do not want to do is go back to the days of the emergency rooms being our health care plan. That's not the right direction for the state of Florida or the nation itself. I think if President Obama was here, he would tell you there's no question the Affordable Health Care Act needs work. But the fact of the matter is we all know what happened. It's been dying by 1,000 cuts for political purposes. They've been doing everything to wreck it and destroy it. Why would we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Let's make sure we can make it better. But as governor, I know when you're on Team Florida, and I'm the governor of Florida, we want to make sure everyone has health care. We'll do everything we can to make sure of it. Matter of fact, the one thing I've seen is that not only do we need to come up with a plan to reduce the cost of prescription drugs going forward, because we know what it's doing to people in Florida, but we need to put together a symposium, a blue panel, made up of doctors, insurance companies, nurses, patients, healthcare professionals. And because there's no great model out there around the country, I can tell you that because we've researched it, let's create a model ourselves that maybe we can lead the nation as being at the forefront of healthcare going forward. So thank you.
Thank you.